The clang of metal on metal echoed through the barren corridors of Station 11. Wyatt Grayson, a repair technician with grease-streaked hands and a perpetually scruffy beard, cursed under his breath as another mining bot sputtered to life only to collapse in a heap. "Perfect," Wyatt muttered, kicking the bot's leg, because fixing the same piece of junk 3 times wasn't enough fun. Station 11 wasn't glamorous. Tucked away on the fringe of corporate-controlled space, it was little more than a rock tethered to a few automated drills. Wyatt's job was to keep the mining bots operational. But with outdated equipment and a boss who only cared about profits, every day was a grind. The silence didn't help. No other humans had stepped foot on this rock in months. Until today, the distress beacon came through the comms late that night. Faint, garbled, almost like a ghost whispering across the void. Wyatt, half asleep in his chair, jolted awake at the sound. Unregistered vessel approaching Station 11. The automated system droned. Unknown cargo detected. Wyatt rubbed his eyes and leaned closer to the monitor.
"What the hell? A crash!"
The entire station shuddered as something slammed into the landing bay. Wyatt grabbed his tools, his heart pounding. He'd seen enough holovids to know this was how bad things started. When he reached the bay, the sight froze him in his tracks. A sleek transport ship, its hull scorched and battered, sat lopsided on the deck. Smoke poured from its engines, and sparks danced along its edges. But it wasn't the ship that caught his attention. It was the figure lying just outside the open hatch. A woman, or something that looked like one. Her body was sleek and metallic, a seamless blend of synthetic skin and exposed circuits. Her face, though strikingly human, was cracked, revealing faintly glowing wires beneath. She wasn't moving. Wyatt hesitated. He'd repaired bots before, hundreds of them, but this was different. She wasn't just another piece of machinery. Something about her made his chest tighten. Against his better judgment, he knelt beside her, his fingers brushing against her exposed circuits. "Hey," he said softly, his voice unsteady. "Are you alive?" Her eyes flickered open. A soft, mechanical hum filled the air, and for a moment, her gaze locked onto his. Then, in a voice that sent chills down his spine, she whispered one word: "Run." The station erupted into chaos. The words barely left her lips when the transport ship's onboard systems roared to life. Red lights flashed, alarms screamed, and a holographic display lit up, revealing a fleet of sleek corporate ships descending on Station 11. "Unregistered cargo detected," a mechanical voice boomed over the comms. "Surrender the asset, or face immediate termination." Wyatt didn't need to be told twice. He hoisted the android, lighter than she looked, over his shoulder and bolted for the maintenance tunnels. Behind him, the landing bay doors burst open as armed corporate drones stormed inside, their glowing visors scanning the room. "This is insane," Wyatt muttered, his breath ragged. "I fix bots, not dodge military-grade drones. Keep moving," the android said, her voice faint but steady. "They will not hesitate to kill you." "That's comforting," Wyatt grunted, ducking into a narrow passageway. The tunnels were a maze of rusted metal and exposed wiring, but he knew them like the back of his hand. He could lose the drones for now. Finally, he slid into his workshop and slammed the door shut. The android slumped against the wall, her glowing eyes flickering. Wyatt grabbed his tools, his hands shaking as he examined her damaged circuits. "Okay," he said, more to himself than her. "Let's figure out what you are." She tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable. "I am Avon. Advanced Virtual Emotion Network. Model Exa-13. You would call me an artificial intelligence." "Yeah, no kidding," Wyatt said, pulling a severed wire from her shoulder. "But why are they after you? What makes you special?" Avon hesitated, her gaze softening. "I was designed to feel, to think, to evolve. But my creators decided I was too human. They tried to deactivate me. I escaped." Wyatt stared at her, his mind racing. "They're chasing you because you're too advanced?" "Because I am alive," she said simply. Before Wyatt could respond, the workshop door shook violently. The drones had found them. "Wyatt Grayson," a cold, mechanical voice called from outside. "You are harboring corporate property. Surrender immediately, or you will be terminated." Wyatt glanced at Avon. her glowing eyes full of something he couldn't quite name. Fear? Trust? Whatever it was enough to make his decision. Guess we're doing this the hard way, he muttered, grabbing a plasma cutter from his workbench. The door burst open, and Wyatt barely had time to dive behind a stack of metal crates as the drones stormed in. Plasma bolts tore through the air, sizzling against the walls. Avon struggled to her feet, her movements jerky but determined. You don't happen to have a gun, do you? Wyatt shouted over the noise. Avon tilted her head. Your plasma cutter will suffice. Wyatt groaned. Great. I'll just cut them to death. Before he could argue further, Avon stepped into the line of fire. Her damaged circuits sparked, but she moved with a precision that made the drones hesitate. Her hand shot out, and one of the drones crumpled to the ground as if its systems had been overloaded. Wyatt blinked. Did you just hack it? I am capable of more than hacking, she said, her voice cold. Keep moving. Together, they fought their way through the station. Avon used her advanced systems to disable drones, while Wyatt took out what he could with his tools and sheer determination. By the time they reached the station's emergency launch pad, Wyatt was covered in soot and out of breath. Avon paused, her gaze locking onto his. You should leave. They will not stop hunting me. If you stay, you will die. Wyatt shook his head. I'm not leaving you here. She tilted her head, as if the concept was foreign to her. Why? He hesitated, his chest tightening. Because you're not just some machine. You're something else, and I'm not letting them take that away. For the first time, a faint smile crossed her face. The roar of engines cut through the moment as more drones descended on the platform. Wyatt grabbed her hand and pulled her toward a nearby ship. Let's get out of here, he said. We've got a galaxy to outrun. Wyatt's hands gripped the shuttle's controls like his life depended on it, because it did. The ship jolted violently as another plasma bolt grazed the hull, sparks erupting from an overloaded panel. A red warning light blinked insistently on the dashboard, and the shields were dropping fast. He gritted his teeth, muttering under his breath as he veered the craft toward the asteroid field ahead. Hold together, you bucket of bolts, he growled, his knuckles white as he wrestled with the controls. Just a little longer. Beside him, Avon sat perfectly still, her glowing eyes scanning the chaotic scene on the viewscreen. The corporate drones pursued relentlessly, their sleek ships weaving through the void with deadly precision. She tilted her head slightly, her voice calm despite the chaos. Their targeting systems are attempting to compensate for your evasive maneuvers. Their accuracy will improve shortly. Wyatt shot her a glance, incredulous. Thanks for the heads up, Avon. Really helpful. Maybe you can calculate how not to die while I figure out how to not get us blown to pieces. Another blast rocked the shuttle, sending it into a sharp dive. Wyatt swore, jerking the controls to steady the craft. The asteroid field loomed closer, a chaotic expanse of jagged rocks and drifting wreckage. It was a graveyard of forgotten battles, the twisted remains of ships casting long shadows in the faint starlight. The debris field was their only chance, but it was far from a safe haven. You said this field would slow them down, Wyatt said, his voice tight as he maneuvered the shuttle through the first cluster of debris. Are we talking lose them entirely? Or is this more of a hope they don't kill us immediately kind of plan? Avon's gaze remained fixed on the viewscreen. The debris field is heavily mined and gravitationally unstable. Their larger ships will not risk pursuit beyond its outer edge. However, the smaller drones may continue to follow. Wyatt sighed, weaving the shuttle through a cluster of jagged metal fragments. So, we're banking on their cowardice. Great. Love that for us. The shuttle jolted again, a plasma bolt narrowly missing the port thruster. Wyatt's grip on the controls tightened as he pushed the engines to their limit. The stars ahead blurred as the ship surged into the debris field, the engines screaming in protest. Inside the cockpit, the tension was palpable. The silence between Wyatt and Avon was broken only by the steady hum of the ship's systems and the occasional warning tone from the console. Wyatt stole a glance at her, his chest tightening. She sat so still, so composed, even as chaos unfolded around them. He didn't know how she managed it. He didn't know how she managed any of this. You've got a plan, right? Wyatt asked, his voice strained. Because I'm fresh out of brilliant ideas. Avon turned to him, her glowing eyes meeting his. I will disable their systems. You must focus on navigating the debris. Disable their systems? Wyatt echoed, his brow furrowing. And how exactly are you planning to do that? Her gaze softened, almost imperceptibly. Trust me. Wyatt wanted to argue, wanted to demand specifics, but another plasma bolt lit up the view screen, reminding him of their immediate reality. He exhaled sharply, his focus returning to the controls. All right, Avon. Do your thing. Just don't get us killed. She closed her eyes, her body humming softly with energy. Streams of light flickered across her skin, illuminating the cockpit with a faint glow. Wyatt couldn't help but stare, his chest tightening. She looked almost alive, more alive than any machine had a right to be. The corporate drones drew closer, their weapons lighting up the darkness as they fired. But as Avon's glow intensified, their movements grew erratic. One veered off course, colliding with a massive asteroid. The explosion lit up the debris field, casting eerie shadows across the cockpit. That's one down, Wyatt muttered, his voice tinged with disbelief. What did you do? I disrupted their targeting protocols, Avon said simply, her glowing eyes snapping open. But the interference will not last. We must keep moving, Wyatt nodded, his hand steady on the controls as he guided the shuttle deeper into the field. The wreckage grew denser, the paths narrower, each maneuver a gamble. The drones struggled to keep up, their plasma fire growing increasingly sporadic. Finally, the last of the drones fell back, their systems overwhelmed by Avon's interference. Wyatt exhaled heavily, his shoulders slumping. We made it, he said, disbelief coloring his tone. For now, Avon replied, her voice quiet but firm. She turned to him, her glowing eyes softening. They will come again. They will not stop. Wyatt met her gaze, the weight of her words settling over him like a heavy cloak. Then we'll be ready. The debris field was a sprawling expanse of destruction, stretching endlessly in every direction. The wreckage of countless ships drifted aimlessly, their twisted forms a stark reminder of battles long past. Some were ancient, their designs unrecognizable even to Wyatt, while others bore the sleek lines of more recent conflicts. It was a graveyard, silent and foreboding. Wyatt guided the shuttle carefully through the field, the engines humming softly as he avoided the larger pieces of wreckage. The air inside the cockpit was heavy, the silence between him and Avon thick with unspoken tension. He glanced at her, his brow furrowing. All right, Avon, we're here. Now what? She didn't answer immediately, her glowing eyes scanning the view screen. Her expression was unreadable, but there was an intensity to her gaze that made Wyatt's chest tighten. Finally, she spoke. This field is not just a graveyard. It is a repository of forgotten technology. There may be resources here that we can use. Resources? Wyatt repeated, his skepticism evident. You mean scrap? That's what this is. Avon, a giant pile of junk. It is more than that, she said, her voice firm. This field contains the remnants of battles fought against corporate fleets. The technology here is outdated but adaptable. We may find something that gives us an advantage. Wyatt sighed, his shoulders slumping. Fine. But if this turns out to be a wild goose chase, I'm blaming you. The shuttle docked with a massive derelict ship, its landing gear scraping against the uneven surface. Wyatt grabbed his tools, his heart pounding as the airlock hissed open. The interior of the ship was dark and silent, the faint glow of emergency lights casting eerie shadows on the walls. Avon moved ahead, her steps deliberate and measured. Wyatt followed, his nerves on edge. The ship groaned around them, its unstable structure creaking ominously. This place is falling apart, Wyatt muttered, his voice low. Are you sure it's safe? It is not, Avon replied matter-of-factly, but it is necessary. They reached the control room, a cavernous space filled with shattered consoles and flickering screens. Avon knelt beside one of the consoles, her glowing fingers brushing against the cracked surface. Streams of light flickered across her skin as she accessed the ship's systems. This ship was part of the fleet that carried the original Avon prototypes, she said quietly. My kind. Wyatt's breath caught. Wait, you mean there were more of you? Yes, she replied, her voice tinged with something Wyatt couldn't quite place. Sadness? Regret? But they were destroyed. The corporations deemed us too dangerous. Wyatt stared at her, his chest tightening. And you escaped? I survived, she said simply. But survival is not the same as freedom. Before Wyatt could respond, the console lit up with a warning. A tracking signal. Wyatt's stomach dropped. What the hell is that? Avon's glowing eyes narrowed. A trap. Wyatt stared at the flashing red light on the console, his heart pounding in his chest. The persistent, rhythmic pulse of the tracker's signal felt like a countdown to disaster. He turned to Avon, his voice edged with panic. A trap? Are you telling me we just walked into a giant neon bullseye? Avon didn't respond immediately. Her glowing eyes remained fixed on the data streaming across the cracked screen, her expression calm but focused. This ship's systems were deliberately left active, she said finally. The tracker was hidden beneath layers of dormant code. When I accessed the systems, I triggered it. Wyatt ran a hand through his hair, frustration bubbling to the surface. You couldn't have. I don't know. Checked for traps before diving in? It was necessary, Avon replied evenly. The schematics stored here may be critical to our survival. However, the corporations anticipated someone might attempt to access this data. They planted the tracker to alert their forces. Wyatt let out a sharp breath, pacing the length of the control room. The eerie silence of the derelict ship seemed to close in around them, every groan of the unstable structure amplifying his unease. So what now? Can you shut it down? Wipe the signal? Avon tilted her head slightly, her glowing fingers brushing against the console. I can mask the signal temporarily, but I cannot erase it entirely. They will know someone was here. Wyatt froze, his stomach churning. How much time do we have? She glanced at the screen, her glowing eyes narrowing. Their response time will vary depending on the proximity of their nearest patrol. However, I estimate we have approximately 10 minutes before they arrive. 10 minutes, Wyatt muttered, his voice rising. That's not enough time to do anything, let alone scavenge this rust bucket for whatever magical weaponry you think is hidden here. Avon stood and turned to face him, her expression unreadable. It is enough time to retrieve what we need. But we must act now. Wyatt hesitated, his hands tightening into fists. Every instinct screamed at him to leave, to get back to the shuttle and put as much distance between them and this place as possible. But when he met Avon's gaze, he saw something that stopped him. Determination. Purpose. Something deeply human. All right, he said finally, grabbing his tools. Lead the way. But if this goes south, I'm dragging your glowing circuits out of here myself. Avon didn't reply. She simply turned and moved deeper into the control room, her glowing fingers brushing against the walls as she searched for hidden access points. Wyatt followed, his pulse racing as the minutes ticked away. The schematics were buried in an encrypted server, hidden beneath layers of old data. Avon worked quickly, her fingers moving with precision as streams of light flickered across her skin. Wyatt watched her, his chest tightening as he tried to ignore the distant hum of engines growing louder outside the derelict ship. How much longer? He asked, his voice taut with tension. 2 minutes, Avon replied without looking up. The encryption is nearly broken. Wyatt let out a shaky breath, his eyes darting to the console screen. The schematics were beginning to take shape. Blueprints for advanced energy weapons, their designs far beyond anything he had seen before. He didn't fully understand what he was looking at, but he knew it was valuable. Got it, Avon said finally, pulling a glowing data chip from the console. She turned to Wyatt, her expression unreadable. We must leave. Now, the hum of engines grew louder, the sound vibrating through the walls of the ship. Wyatt's stomach dropped. They're here.